It was the kind of summer evening that makes you think nothing bad could possibly happen. The sky was soft gold, the wind just warm enough to rustle the screen door. In the small town of Harriston, things moved slowly, like the creak of a porch swing or the drip of a garden hose onto concrete. 10-year-old Eli Mercer was sitting at the dinner table, still wearing his bike helmet. He was a small kid, wiry, bright-eyed, with a mop of dark brown curls, and a million questions always bubbling just under his breath. He ate in fast bites, not because he was starving, but because his favorite part of the day was waiting his evening bike ride. He called it his explorer hour. One lap around the neighborhood, always home before the streetlights blinked on. His mother, Lydia, watched him with a smile, tired but warm. She worked long shifts at the town's only clinic, single mom, widowed young, the kind of woman who carried weight without showing it. Her hands were calloused from cleaning and cooking and working, but they always moved gently when tucking in Eli's shirt collar or adjusting his helmet. That night, Eli was unusually excited. He'd found something earlier in the field near the woods. He wouldn't say what, only that it was super cool, and that he was going to draw a map when he got back. "You be back by the time I count to 100 in my head, or you're grounded," Lydia teased, standing on the porch with a dish towel in one hand. Eli gave a goofy salute. "Yes, ma'am." He grinned, pedaling away in quick strokes, his red taillight blinking like a heartbeat in the dusk. She watched him turn the corner, and that was the last time she saw her son. Back inside, Lydia washed dishes, hummed an old Motown song, and turned on the kettle. At 7:55 p.m., she glanced out the window. No bike light. No Eli. She wasn't worried yet. By 8:10, the sky had dimmed. A few porch lights flickered on. She stepped outside again, scanned the sidewalk, called his name. No answer. By 8:20, her gut tightened. At 8:31, she picked up the phone and called her neighbor. Then another, then another. At 9:12, she called the police. By midnight, the entire block was out, searching, flashlights in hands, voices calling into trees and backyards. His bike was found at the edge of Whitmore Creek Park, just beside the gravel trail laid neatly against a tree. Helmet still attached to the handlebars. No skid marks. No signs of struggle. Just gone. Inside Eli's room, his bed remained untouched. The comic book on his pillow was still open to page 7. A sock was half hanging off the dresser. On the windowsill, a mason jar with a firefly still flickering faintly in the dark. The officers asked Lydia if there had been problems at home. Had he seemed upset? Had she punished him? Had she locked the door before he left? Each question felt like a slap. No, she kept saying. No. He was happy. He was just riding his bike, just like every night. But the way one officer looked at her, as if he didn't believe her, as if he was already writing something in his head, stayed with her for years. And somewhere far off, in the stillness of night, the sound of a single bike wheel, slowly spinning in place, echoed in Lydia's mind, over and over again. The summer night swallowed the boy whole, and the silence that followed would last 25 years. The first night blurred into morning like a bad dream that refused to end. Lydia hadn't slept. She hadn't even sat down. She paced from room to room, opening closets, checking behind the shower curtain, calling Eli's name into every corner of the house, as if somehow impossibly he'd slipped back in during the night without her hearing. The neighbors took shifts combing the park. The town's small search and rescue unit assembled before dawn. Flashlights swept through trees and weeds. Dogs sniffed the trail near the bike. But there was nothing. No shoe. No scrap of fabric. No footprints leading away. Just that strange, careful way the bike had been placed, almost like Eli had set it down and planned to come back. The police launched an official missing child investigation by 6:00 a.m. Flyers were printed and taped to utility poles and store windows. Lydia stood beside the sheriff as he briefed the press, her hands trembling so badly that she had to grip the podium. But no one could offer answers. Only guesses. He could have wandered into the woods and gotten turned around, one officer said. Could have been a stranger passing through, another whispered. Or he ran away. Lydia snapped at that one. My son didn't run, she said. He rides his bike. He talks to squirrels. He has a bedtime and a jar full of fireflies in his window. He didn't run away. He's lost, and someone needs to find him. But in Harriston, things didn't happen like this. Not real things. Not awful things. A missing poster flapped in the wind outside the bakery. Churchgoers lit candles. But by the third day, people began locking their doors early. The news trucks moved on to another story. The sheriff came by each morning. Lydia started recognizing the look on his face before he even opened his mouth. It was the same one people wear at funerals. He told her they were expanding the radius, bringing in outside help, considering all possibilities. All possibilities. That phrase burned in her chest. Then came the questions. Had Eli ever been depressed? Was there anyone in your life who might want to hurt you? Had you recently argued with him? Lydia wanted to scream. She wanted to flip the table and scream that she knew her son, that he was the kind of kid who saved worms after it rained, who always tied his shoes twice just in case, who still asked to hold her hand when they crossed the street. But instead, she just nodded, numbed by exhaustion. She spent each night on the front porch just in case he came back and knocked. She kept the porch light on. Every night, for years, and then slowly, painfully, the town moved on. People stopped asking. The posters faded. Search crews were disbanded. But Lydia didn't forget. She kept Eli's room exactly the same. His sheets never changed. His firefly jar still sat on the sill, long emptied but never thrown away. Because deep down, somewhere beyond reason or hope, Lydia knew. Her boy hadn't disappeared into nothing. He was somewhere, and he was waiting to be found. By the fifth day, the word missing had begun to rot. It wasn't just a label anymore. It was an ache that rang in Lydia's ears, with every breath, with every second that ticked past on the old kitchen clock. Her boy wasn't at school. He wasn't at the park. He wasn't anywhere he should have been. The FBI sent a liaison, a man in a gray suit who smiled too politely and didn't drink his coffee. He interviewed Lydia twice, asked about Eli's habits, his friends, his fears, even his dreams. He asked for handwriting samples for any video she might have of him. She handed over birthday tapes, school drawings, a shoebox of Polaroids. The agent took it all and left her with a pamphlet about coping with child loss. It made her want to set the house on fire. Outside, the community continued searching. Not with the same urgency, but they tried. They wanted to help. But Harriston was small. It had no history with this kind of grief. Some neighbors brought over pies. Others prayed. A few simply stopped talking to her. As if whatever had taken Eli might spread. Lydia didn't blame them. Grief has a smell, a shape, a temperature. It chills the air around you until even kindness feels like pity. The police brought in dogs again. This time they sniffed something near a small creek bed behind the woods. They flagged a patch of overturned leaves, but nothing came of it. It was just dirt. 2 weeks and a man in the next county claimed he'd seen a boy matching Eli's description at a gas station restroom. The footage was grainy. The boy never turned his face toward the camera. Lydia watched it 17 times. It wasn't him, or maybe it was. That haunted her more. At 3 weeks, a local hunter found a shredded backpack near the northern woods. It had the same sticker Eli used, a purple dinosaur. Lydia's heart dropped. She rushed to the scene with the sheriff, but it wasn't Eli's. Just a similar model torn by rain and time. Another dead end. Another hole carved into her chest. Then one night, around 2 a.m., Lydia woke up from a dream where Eli had come home older, taller, with the same crooked grin. She walked into his room. Everything looked the same, except the curtains were moving, even though the window was closed. Her heart thudded. She stood there, breath caught in her throat, and then she saw it. On his desk, a single crayon drawing that hadn't been there before. It was a picture of their house, a red bike, a stick figure waving from a window, and in the bottom corner, in purple crayon, "I'm still here." She ran to the sheriff the next morning with the paper in hand. They dusted it for prints, checked the locks. Nothing. No signs of a break-in. They told her it was probably old, maybe something she'd overlooked, but she knew it wasn't. Because the drawing used Eli's new markers, the ones he got for his birthday 2 days before he vanished. It was the first real crack in the narrative. The first sign that maybe he hadn't been taken far. That maybe someone was playing a long, cruel game. And Lydia, she wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. Time didn't move the same after that. 1 year passed, then 2, then 5. And with each one, the world outside Lydia's windows changed. New neighbors moved in storefronts, closed, and reopened. Kids grew taller and then left for college. But inside that house, on Belmont Avenue, it was always the same moment just after dinner, just before dusk, just after a red bike turned the corner and vanished. She stopped using the upstairs bathroom. She stopped listening to the news. She stopped putting up Christmas decorations, but she never stopped waiting. The house began to feel like a museum. Every drawer, every shelf untouched. A relic to Eli's last day. His shoes stayed by the door. His bike helmet still hung on the hook. The cushion he used on the porch swing, sun-faded and brittle, was never moved. Sometimes Lydia thought about packing it all away, but then the silence would hit her. Not just the absence of sound, but the echo of what used to be. The soft tap of sneakers, the hum of cartoons, the rattle of Legos in a plastic bin. It hurt more to imagine him gone than to keep pretending he might come back. Every few years, someone would knock a well-meaning volunteer or a young officer assigned to cold cases. They would ask if they could revisit the file just to see. Lydia would make tea, pull out the shoebox, hand them the drawings, the report copies, the Polaroids, and each time she'd watch hope bloom in their faces and wilt by the end of the visit. But then during the 20th year, something strange happened. A tree limb fell on the roof during a spring storm. It cracked the attic vent. A roofer came by to repair it. While inside, he noticed something odd, an inner panel behind the insulation that didn't match the rest of the structure. "It looks like someone patched it later," he said. Lydia climbed up herself that night, flashlight in hand, knees trembling. She stared at the panel, heart thumping. The wood was newer. It had been sealed not with nails, but with glue. Sloppily, too, like someone was trying to hide something fast. She didn't sleep that night, and by morning she had borrowed a crowbar. It was harder than she thought. Brittle wood, old insulation dust choking the air. But as she pried the panel loose, a dull thud sounded from inside the wall cavity. A box fell out, small, metal, rusted shut. Lydia dropped the crowbar. Her hands shook as she picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, and on its top, scratched faintly into the metal, were 3 words, "For my mom." Lydia stared at the words, like they might disappear if she blinked. "For my mom." It didn't feel real. It didn't feel possible. But the handwriting, shaky, childlike, was unmistakable. It was his. Eli's. Her knees nearly gave out as she sat on the attic floor, the metal box clutched to her chest. The air around her felt electric, like the moment right before a lightning strike. She didn't cry. Not yet. The body doesn't always remember how to cry when the shock is this complete. Back in the kitchen, hands trembling, she fumbled with a butter knife, then a screwdriver, then finally a hammer to pry it open. The lid gave with a rusty groan, and inside was memory. Time-capsuled memory. There was a folded map drawn in crayon. One of Eli's favorite things to do. Only this one was different. The landmarks weren't places Lydia recognized. There were odd labels: the Whisper Tree Secret Room, the Sad Rock, and in the center, a crude drawing of a house, their house with a star on the attic. Then there was the photo roll, tightly wound, undeveloped, and a small, cracked pocket watch that hadn't worked in decades. Lydia recognized it instantly. It belonged to Eli's grandfather. He'd let the boy play with it once, but it had gone missing years before Eli disappeared. The last item was what shattered her: a note, folded in half, written in purple ink. "If you find this, it means I got close. I'm sorry I scared you. I didn't mean to be gone this long. Please don't stop looking. I'm still here. Love, Eli." She didn't breathe for a full 10 seconds. The note trembled in her fingers like it might evaporate. He had written this. He had been alive, not just for a moment, but long enough to write. Long enough to seal a box. Long enough to try and reach her. By the time she drove to the nearest camera shop a half-hour away, her hands were still numb. She barely spoke. Just handed the film to the clerk, paid extra for a rush, and sat on the bench outside staring at the sky like it owed her answers. The manila envelope came back 2 hours later. 5 photos. She opened them slowly, like pages in a ghost story. The first showed trees, dense shadowed, maybe the woods behind Harriston. The second was of what looked like a shack. Old, crooked, a makeshift shelter with a sagging roof. The third, a trapdoor. Wooden cracked, built into the forest floor. The fourth, the interior of somewhere dark. A hand pressed against glass. The fifth was blank. Or maybe the camera had malfunctioned. Maybe it had been taken too late. Lydia pressed the stack to her chest. She couldn't stop shaking. It wasn't just that Eli had survived longer than anyone believed. It was the horrifying possibility that he had been trying to come home all along. Lydia spent that entire night on the living room floor, the photos and the crayon map spread out in front of her, like puzzle pieces that refused to click. She stared at each detail, the way the trees curved in the photo, the weird way Eli labeled things, the Whisper Tree, the Sad Rock. It was childish, but also deliberate. These meant something to him, and to her, because she started to remember. Eli used to name things around town, not in the way other kids did, but with his own quiet logic. The weeping willow by the pond had always been the Whisper Tree. The stone he sat on to watch ducks, the Sad Rock. It wasn't just fantasy. It was a code, and suddenly, the crayon map started to make sense. The star marked her own house, the attic specifically. That meant this map wasn't a fantasy. It was a real guide. She traced the line from the house to the forest. It curved sharply near a bend in the stream and stopped at a rough square, labeled the hidey hole. Her stomach dropped. That's what Eli used to call the hollow behind the old ranger's shack in Whitmore Creek Woods, a place half the town forgot even existed. By morning, Lydia had packed a flashlight, an old photograph of Eli, a water bottle, and a kitchen knife just in case. She drove out to the woods, parked along the overgrown path, and started walking. Her legs trembled the entire way. Branches clawed at her coat. The wind hissed through the leaves like it knew a secret. She found the old shack around noon. It looked almost exactly like the one in the photo, same bent roof, same rusted gutter, same vines wrapped around the frame like veins. But what made her gasp wasn't the structure, it was what sat beside it. A bike tire, old, half buried, twisted with rust, but unmistakably red. She dropped to her knees and sobbed for the first time in years. When she finally approached the shack, she noticed something else. Behind it, covered in moss and branches, was a square outline on the ground. A trapdoor. Eli hadn't made it up. It was real. She pulled the branches away, heart hammering so loudly it drowned out everything else. The hinges were rusted through, but the wood was still solid. She grabbed the handle metal cold sharp and pulled. It groaned open. The smell hit her first damp earth mildew, something else. Something metallic. There was a ladder descending into darkness. She turned on her flashlight and lowered herself down. The space below was narrow, barely wide enough to crouch. But the beam of her flashlight caught something immediately scribbles on the walls. Names, dates, drawings in crayon. And in the far corner, barely visible under an old blanket, a small mold-stained notebook. She reached for it with shaking hands. On the front cover, written in purple ink, it read, "Eli's Real Diary. Don't let them see this." Lydia turned the diary over in her hands, her breath-shallow heart pounding with a force that made her feel faint. The cover was warped, the corners frayed. It had clearly been hidden for years, decades even. But the ink, that unmistakable violet ink Eli had always loved, was still there, still legible, still him. She sat on the floor of that underground space, her flashlight trembling against the wall, and opened it. The first page was dated July 14th, 1998, just 3 days after Eli vanished. If I write every day, maybe Mom will feel it. Maybe the words can reach her somehow. Like telepathy, but with paper. She blinked away tears. The man said not to call for help, but I did. I screamed. I screamed until I lost my voice. He didn't like that. After that, I wasn't allowed to talk for a while. Lydia covered her mouth with her hand, as if she could silence the horror. Eli had been kept, somewhere close enough to still believe she might find him far enough that no one ever did. I heard cars today. I think I'm near a road. I keep counting the seconds between them. It makes me feel like time is real again. I drew the map last night. I'll sneak it upstairs tomorrow. Maybe she'll find it someday. He says my name isn't Eli anymore, but I keep whispering it at night. Eli, Eli, Eli. Page after page chronicled the slow erosion of a little boy's world. He wrote about the darkness, about learning to be silent, about making up games in his head to pass the time. He wrote about the man, though never by name, only descriptions: the smell of cigarettes, the boots that stomped the hum of a radio playing old country songs. Sometimes the entries jumped days, then weeks. Then suddenly a scribbled page written in crooked letters got out, just for a second. He was asleep. I ran, found the creek, saw a house, thought it was ours, but it wasn't. I left the box anyway. I hope she finds it. I'm scared he'll find it first. Lydia stopped reading. Her hands were shaking too badly. She pressed the diary to her chest and sat there in the silence of that hidden room, a space her son had once occupied, had once used as a voice when he couldn't scream. She had found his voice, but not him. Later that night, she sat in her car, parked beside the woods, the diary on her lap, the flashlight dimming. The stars outside were sharp and cold. Her eyes were red. Her phone sat untouched on the passenger seat because she knew what came next. She had to go to the police. But she also knew instinctively that the moment she turned this in, it would no longer belong to her and Eli. It would belong to them, the system, the case. And what if they missed something? What if they turned it into more paperwork, more questions, more silence? No. She had followed the map this far. She would keep going. Lydia didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table with every light on in the house, the diary open in front of her, her fingers tracing each word like braille from the past. She reread the entries again and again, trying to catch details she might have missed, names, directions, any slip that could give her more than she already had. And then she found it, tucked near the back on a wrinkled page that looked like it had been started and stopped dozens of times, was a single sentence that made her blood run cold. He used to live down the road. His fence had deer antlers on it. He watched us from the porch. You told me not to wave. Lydia's pulse spiked because she remembered the man with the antler fence. She'd never spoken to him. He'd lived there only a few years before selling the place and moving maybe around the same time Eli disappeared. He always seemed harmless, a bit odd, kept to himself, but harmless. Except now, her mind reeled with memories she had pushed aside. That one time, she saw him at the grocery store and he stared a little too long. That time, he asked Eli what music he liked while they were outside planting flowers. She remembered how uncomfortable it made her, how she had told Eli later, "Don't talk to him. Just smile and come back inside." And now her son's diary was pointing back to that exact house. By morning, she was standing outside, the old property hands clenched in her coat pockets. The fence was gone now. So were the antlers. But the porch still sagged the same way. The front steps still creaked under her weight. And the mailbox still had the faint outline of a name D. Kember worn from weather and time. She walked the perimeter first, unsure of what she was even looking for. A sign, a feeling, but halfway around the back she froze. There, nailed crudely to the frame of what looked like an old workshop, was a strip of wood with letters burned into it. Eli, 3 letters, uneven, slightly crooked, but unmistakable. Her legs turned to water. She didn't have a warrant. She wasn't even sure who owned the property now, but she couldn't turn away. Not now. Not after this. The workshop was locked, but the back window had long since shattered. She climbed through, cutting her palm slightly on a shard of glass. The inside was choked with dust and decay, old tools, shelves lined with rusted nails, empty boxes. But in the corner, a square outline on the floor, a panel like the one in her attic. She knelt hard in her throat and pulled it open. Beneath it, instead of a ladder or tunnel, there was a cavity in the foundation, shallow, dry-lined with old carpet. And inside, it tucked beneath a tarp, was a pile of children's belongings. A plastic watch, a baseball cap, a shoe size 3. She dropped to her knees. There was no blood, No bones, just artifacts, frozen in time, and among them, a crumpled photograph of Eli. She backed out slowly, hands shaking, tears burning behind her eyes. This wasn't just a hideout. This was a vault, a collection, and whoever had started it had left in a hurry. There was no question now. Someone had taken Eli, and someone had kept something, or someone here. Lydia gripped the photo tighter. She wasn't just chasing memories anymore. She was chasing a man. Lydia knew she couldn't do this alone forever. She'd spent years shouting into a void, hoping someone would care. Now she had evidence, real physical proof, that Eli had been alive and that someone in their quiet town had done the unthinkable. She drove straight to the sheriff's office with the diary, the map, and the photo. Sheriff Harwin, a man who had been a deputy back when Eli first disappeared, blinked in disbelief as she laid it all out on his desk. "This," he whispered, holding the diary with gloved hands. "This changes everything." He promised to send a team to the old Kember property, promised to get warrants, promised to treat this like the active case it is. But Lydia knew better than to wait. That evening, she went next door, to the last man who might still remember the old Kember rumors, Franklin Moore. He was 78 now, mostly blind, mostly deaf, but still sharp when it mattered. She hadn't spoken to him in years. After Eli vanished, people either leaned in or pulled away. Franklin had pulled away. But when she sat across from him, showed him the map, the diary, the picture, his jaw clenched. "I told them," he said finally. "I told them that man wasn't right." Lydia leaned in. "You knew him." Franklin nodded, eyes glassy. "He never worked. Always outside. Always building things. I once saw him bring a roll of carpet into that workshop in the middle of the night. Thought it was odd. But what could I say? People said I was paranoid." He shook his head. "And then right after your boy went missing, Kember moved out. No forwarding address. Just gone." Lydia's heart sank. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. She thanked Franklin, stood to leave, but he grabbed her wrist gently before she did. "One more thing," he said. "Your boy. I saw him once. I thought I was dreaming." Her breath caught. "It was about a year after he disappeared. I was walking by the edge of the woods, just before dusk. I saw a kid in a red hoodie sitting under that weeping willow. He looked thin, scared. But when he saw me, he ran, fast, into the trees." Lydia's throat went dry. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "I did," he said softly. "But no one believed me. Said it was grief, or that I saw one of the neighbor boys. But I knew. I knew it was him." Back home, Lydia sat at Eli's old desk and opened the diary again. She read a page she had skipped earlier, one with shaky, smeared ink. "I almost got out again today. I saw the old man next door. I waved, but he just stared at me like I wasn't real. I think maybe I'm not." Lydia closed the book gently. She now had 3 things. The police never had a map, a name, and a witness, even if it came 25 years too late. And as night fell across the town of Harriston, she didn't feel cold. She felt ready. Because Eli had left her a trail, and she was going to follow it all the way to the end. 2 days passed before the sheriff's team returned from the Kember property with the full report. The crawl space beneath the workshop had been officially declared a site of interest. Evidence was bagged and cataloged. Items from multiple children had been recovered, not just Eli's. It was bigger than anyone imagined. They reopened not only Eli's case, but 3 other disappearances from the region, cold cases long dismissed as unrelated. And Lydia couldn't sleep because one question remained. How did the diary end up in her attic wall? If Eli had never come home, how did something so personal, so deliberate get sealed into her own house? She returned to the attic. This time, she searched the beams, the insulation, even behind old storage crates. And just when she was about to give up, she noticed something odd about one of the floorboards near the eaves. It didn't match the others. The wood was older, more brittle, and slightly warped at the edge. She pried it up with a screwdriver. Beneath it was a narrow gap, and inside was another piece of paper, folded into quarters, yellowed with time. She opened it carefully. It wasn't from Eli. It was from someone else. I never wanted to do this, but he said he'd hurt me if I didn't help. I watched the boy for 3 days. He cried the first night. Then he stopped. I brought him food. He wouldn't eat. I begged him to tell me his name, but he just whispered one word over and over: home. I don't know what happened to him after that. I couldn't stay. I'm sorry. I really am. D. Lydia's breath caught. Whoever this was, they had been involved. A witness. Maybe even a helper. Maybe a prisoner of the same monster. She reread the signature D. Could it be D. Kember, or someone else entirely? She took the letter to Sheriff Harwin the next morning. He read it in silence, jaw tight. We need to find this person, he said. We need to find every D who's ever lived within 100 miles. But Lydia's gut whispered something else. What if this person had already come forward? What if they'd tried to tell the truth and no one listened? What if they were still nearby, hiding in plain sight? That night, Lydia sat by Eli's window, the one that faced the backyard. The moonlight spilled across the old oak tree he used to climb. She remembered something. Years ago, just after Eli vanished, someone left a bouquet of violets on their porch. No note, no explanation. Just the flowers Eli's favorite. She had dismissed it back then, thought it was a mistake. But what if it wasn't? What if someone, maybe even D, had been trying to speak the only way they could? And what if the attic wasn't the only place holding secrets? Lydia didn't wait for the sheriff's office to act. She drove to the town archives herself, to the narrow, dust-choked records room in the basement of City Hall. With a list of every property owner on the street from 30 years ago, she began cross-referencing names, birth dates, and anything with a D. She found him on the second page. Daniel Kember. Born 1944. Died no date. She blinked. How could someone be listed as alive, but also missing from every recent database? She dug deeper. Turns out, Daniel hadn't died. He'd been moved. Quietly. His name appeared in a transfer order from the county health department. Destination: Ridgeview. Assisted: living a quiet nursing home 30 minutes outside Harriston. She went that same afternoon. The receptionist was polite but hesitant. Are you family? No, Lydia said, holding up the faded photo of Eli. But I think he knew something about my son. That changed everything. A nurse guided her down the hall, past beige walls and murmured televisions. When they reached room 214, she paused. He doesn't talk much anymore, she warned. He's foggy, but maybe you'll get through. Lydia stepped inside. Daniel Kember sat in a worn recliner, thin and pale with wisps of gray hair and watery eyes that barely seemed to focus. His hands trembled in his lap. She sat beside him, unsure how to begin. I'm Lydia Halley, she said gently. My son, Eli, went missing in 1998. I found your name. A note. I think you knew him. No reaction. She took out the diary, opened it, held up the map. Still nothing. Then she whispered, he used to say the word home over and over. Does that mean anything to you? Daniel blinked. Something flickered behind his eyes. He turned slowly and looked at her. I left it in the wall. He rasped, voice dry as paper. Lydia's heart stilled. You! You wrote the letter. He nodded once. Barely. Was he alive when you left him? Daniel's lip trembled. I don't know. He whispered. He stopped crying. I didn't hear him anymore. Why didn't you go to the police? I was a coward. He said I'd be next. I believed him. Lydia leaned forward, fighting tears. Who was he? But Daniel's face clouded. He began to tremble. I shouldn't talk, he said. They still listen. Even now. Who listens, Daniel? He reached for her hand with frail fingers and whispered something so soft she almost didn't catch it. He never acted alone. Lydia walked out into the parking lot with her knees shaking, because in all the years of searching, no one had ever suggested more than one. Now, there was another shadow in the story, and it had been there the whole time. Lydia drove home in silence, Daniel's final words echoing in her mind. He never acted alone. For 25 years, she had imagined one man, one monster lurking in the dark. But now the story cracked wider. There had been someone else. Maybe someone even closer. Back at home, she pulled out the map again. The red crayon lines, the stars, the tiny X's. She stared at them with new eyes. Then it hit her. One of the marks wasn't just a location. It was a person. Next to a small cluster of trees, where the map ended abruptly, were 3 letters written in shaky, childlike script. M-A-P. Not a direction, not a route. Initials. She rifled through her old address books, yearbooks, school rosters, anything from Eli's life before that summer. And she found him, Martin Allen Porter, an old friend of her ex-husband's. A man who used to come by, sometimes help fix things around the house, bring little gifts for Eli. A book here, a toy there. Lydia remembered thinking he was odd but harmless. He moved away just after Eli disappeared. Said it was too painful to stay in town. No one questioned it. But Eli had drawn his initials into the map. Why? The next morning, she asked Sheriff Harwin to run the name. At first, nothing. No recent address. No listed employer. Nothing suspicious on the surface. Until they pulled up a sealed report from 1999. Martin Porter had been questioned in connection with an unrelated missing persons case in a neighboring county. A teenage girl who vanished after school. Her case had never been solved. And then, like smoke, he disappeared. Sheriff Harwin went pale. I should have seen this. He was never officially cleared. He issued a search bulletin. Martin Porter was now officially a person of interest. That night, Lydia sat in Eli's old room, untouched for over 2 decades. She ran her fingers along the shelves, the desk, the window where he used to watch the rain. She pulled open a drawer she hadn't touched in years. Inside was a small shoebox, and in it, a note, the last one Eli ever wrote her, scribbled in pencil on lined paper. Mom, if anything weird ever happens, promise you'll check the attic. I hid something for you, just in case. Her breath caught. He knew. Eli had left more than a map. He had left a warning, and it had taken her 25 years to read it. Lydia sat on the attic floor again, staring at the map, the diary, the note from Eli, and now Martin Allen Porter's name staring back at her like an echo from the past. Everything pointed to someone she had trusted, someone who'd been inside her house, someone who had smiled at her son, offered him candy books laughter, someone who had helped build the wall behind which Eli's voice had been buried for years. She opened the shoebox again, turning it upside down just in case something had been hidden inside. A paperclip, a gum wrapper, and then A tiny silver charm fell to the floor. It was a crescent moon, the same shape as the one on the necklace Eli wore every day. Her heart slammed in her chest. She remembered he never took it off. Never. So why would the charm be in his drawer and not on him? Unless someone removed it. She took the charm to the sheriff's office. Ballistics couldn't do much with it. No fingerprints, no DNA. But Harwin stared at it for a long time. Martin gave that to him, didn't he? He asked softly. Lydia nodded. I remember the day, she said. Eli said it was a thank you gift for helping him move boxes. He wore it like it meant something. Sheriff Harwin leaned back, eyes tight. Then that means Eli knew. He remembered. Lydia looked up sharply. What do you mean? Harwin pulled a folder from his desk. Inside were crime scene photos from the Kember workshop crawl space. One photo showed a name scratched into the wooden beam with a nail. Map. Not initials. A word. A label. The map. Eli's map wasn't just a guide. It was a code. He had left them everything. Back at home, Lydia traced the map again, this time overlaying it against the town's current street grid. She looked for connections, parks, shortcuts, places a child might remember but never fully understand. And that's when she saw it. The final X on the map didn't point to the Kember house. It pointed to her house, to Eli's bedroom, to the wall between the closet and the chimney shaft, the only part of the room they had never touched in all those years. With trembling hands, she pulled everything away and knocked. Hollow, she cut a small square of drywall and pried it free. Inside the cavity was a metal lunchbox rusted at the hinges. Inside that, a cassette tape and a note. If you find this, Mom, I hope you don't cry. I hope you fight. Lydia sat in stunned silence, staring at the cassette tape resting in her palm. She hadn't seen a tape player in years. It took her half the night rummaging through garage boxes to find Eli's old Walkman still dusty but miraculously intact. She popped in the tape, held her breath, and pressed play. A soft click, static, and then a boy's voice. Hi, Mom. It's me. I don't know if you'll hear this, but I think maybe you will. I'm scared. But I've been writing. I've been drawing maps. I think maybe someone will find them if I don't get out. Lydia covered her mouth. The voice was younger than she remembered, but it was Eli, her son, speaking across time. There's a man. Two, actually. One is quiet, mean. He hurts people. The other one is scared like me. I think he only helps because he's afraid too. He sneaks me food when he can. I think his name is Daniel. Her eyes welled with tears. Daniel. He had tried. He had failed. But he had tried. They say no one is looking anymore. But I think you still are. You always said moms never stop. So if you find this, please don't stop. A long silence followed. Then in a whisper, I still think about home, my room, my bed, you humming in the kitchen. If I come back, will I still be 13? Or will you be older too? The tape clicked off. Lydia sat, frozen tears rolling down her face. Her fingers trembled as she took the tape out, clutching it like a lifeline. There it was, the proof, the voice. More than anything the police ever found, this was him. This was Eli's soul, sealed in a box, waiting for her for 25 years. The next day, Sheriff Harwin listened to the tape 3 times before speaking. This is a confession, he said quietly. Not from Eli, from the men who did this. It puts Daniel Kember at the scene. And it proves there was a second man. He lifted a folder, and we think we know where Martin Porter is. Lydia's breath caught. He changed his name 3 times. He's been living under an alias just over the state line. working at a small-town hardware store. Harwin stood. We're going to bring him in. Lydia's hands clenched. And if he runs, Harwin looked her in the eye. He won't. But Lydia didn't wait for the arrest. She drove out that night to the place the sheriff's office had identified, a town of less than 3,000 people, where no one knew the name Porter. She parked across from the store and watched. And then, there he was, older, thinner, grayer, but still him. The man who used to give her son books. The man who smiled like a friend. The man who helped seal a wall around a child's future. And now he was laughing with a customer, free, alive, normal. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel, because for 25 years, she had buried grief like it was her job. But tonight anger was waking up. Lydia didn't follow him home that first night. She waited, watched, observed. She needed to know what kind of man Martin Porter had become. Not because she wanted closure, but because she wanted to understand how someone could walk through life like nothing had happened. The next morning, she returned. Same time, same place. Watched him open the store, greet customers, smile with perfect practiced ease. By day 3, she couldn't take it anymore. She walked into the hardware store. The bell over the door chimed. Martin turned from the register. Good morning, he called cheerfully. Need help with anything? She froze. It had been 25 years, but he didn't recognize her. Not yet. He approached friendly and polite. Then their eyes met, and something flickered. Do I know you? He asked, voice faltering. She held up the silver crescent moon charm, dangling from a thin chain. His face drained of color. Where did you get that? He whispered. Lydia's voice was steady. From my son, Eli Halley. You remember him, don't you? He took a step back, bumped into the counter, knocked over a box of screws. Customers turned startled. Martin stammered, I don't, there's been a mistake. But Lydia didn't blink. There's no mistake. You were there. You helped him build the map. He trusted you. I didn't. Stop. The word was like a gunshot. Firm. Cold. Final. You're going to talk to the police. Today. Or I swear to God, I will make sure the world hears that tape. His eyes widened. Tape. Her voice dropped almost a whisper. Your name. Your initials. Your voice might not be on it, but your shadow is. He looked around the store. 2 customers stared at them from the aisle. A teenage clerk had frozen behind the register. And for the first time in his life, Martin Porter looked small, cowardly, exactly as Eli had described. He didn't say another word. Lydia turned and walked out. By the time she got home, Sheriff Harwin had called. Martin Porter was in custody. That night, Lydia stood in Eli's old room. She looked out the window, where he used to press his face against the glass and count the stars. She held the diary close. She whispered to the silence, I didn't stop, just like you asked. And for the first time in 2.5 decades, the air in the room felt light, as if someone had finally exhaled. It was spring again in Harriston. The kind of spring where dogwoods bloomed like soft clouds, and the air carried just a hint of old rain. The Halley house stood the same, but not quite. Eli's room had changed. Not in decoration. The posters, the books, the tiny hand-drawn stars on the ceiling were all still there. But now, the room wasn't a shrine to grief. It was a space that remembered. In the months following Martin Porter's arrest, investigators found more evidence. Some hidden in places too cruel to name. Others so small, they almost got missed. Scribbled initials, cracked toy parts, and at last a piece of Eli's blue backpack buried beneath floorboards in a barn just across the state line. Daniel Kember passed away quietly in his sleep never offering another word. Porter pled guilty. There was no trial, no chance to lie. It didn't bring Eli back, but it gave him back his name. On the day of what would have been Eli's 38th birthday, Lydia sat at the edge of the town library garden, the same one Eli used to visit after school. She read aloud a page from his diary, the one with pressed violets glued to the corner. My, if I ever get out, I want to go back to the lake. Not because I liked it there, but because Mom always made grilled cheese in the car afterward and played that same Joni Mitchell song that made her cry a little, but laugh too. I hope she remembers that. Lydia smiled through tears. Yes, she remembered. That night, she did something she hadn't done in 25 years. She left the light on in Eli's room. Just one. Not because she expected him to walk through the door, but because some lights are meant to stay burning. For memory, for love, for home.